One of the biggest pitfalls in relationships is our inability to set boundaries for fear of rejection. And when we lack boundaries, it leads to the ultimate rejection eventually. Recognize that when you establish boundaries, someone will perceive that as a rejection, and that is inevitable. However, if you avoid setting boundaries, you may face rejection yourself. So either you have the courage to embrace rejection or be ready to experience feeling rejected at every turn of your life. Understanding the polarity that boundaries and rejection presents can help us to reframe a mindset shift to accept that with boundaries, we are bound to face rejection. And this works both ways, as we will continue to experience this throughout different phases of our lives. Boundaries and rejection are intertwined in the sense that setting and maintaining healthy boundaries can sometimes lead to experiencing rejection from others. When we establish boundaries, we are essentially defining our limits and communicating our needs and expectations to others. And this can sometimes result in others feeling uncomfortable or unwilling to respect those boundaries, which then leads to a feeling of rejection. However, it is essential and crucial to have boundaries as a form of self-care, and that would also help you to nurture healthy relationships. Rejection in this context can be seen as a natural consequence of asserting boundaries and values, because your boundaries are designed to be a container to protect yourself and your emotional well-being, even if that means facing rejection from others. My name is Veena Raji, and this channel is dedicated to talking about self-healing, healing from childhood trauma, narcissistic abuse, and attachment styles, something that I have worked on my own over the last 4 years now without any professional guidance. And therefore, I have dedicated to starting this channel to share with you on my personal transformation journey, hoping that this information will help those who are currently on a similar path. Now, if you are new here, I would really appreciate if you could just take a moment to hit subscribe, like, share, comment down below. That would really help me to expand and grow this community and reach more people. And you would also not miss out on any new videos that I post on a weekly basis. In today's video, we are going to talk about navigating relationships, boundaries, and rejections, and everything in between, as this is something that we deal with on our everyday life. So let's get right into it. Your boundaries are a universal order that is meant to guide and protect you. It is a law that is built for yourself. So if someone violates the law, there are consequences. What if there are no consequences to an action? It leads to chaos and destruction with no accountability. When speaking of individuals, we are looking at emotional destruction in the sense of stress and emotional trauma that affects the overall well-being, that leads to a lack of fulfillment and joy in their life. And therefore, having boundaries will help you to lead in the right order that is right for your mind, body, and soul. Anyone that is disrespecting or not accepting of your boundaries will have to be removed or given a restricted access to yourself. Otherwise, it leads to chaos, be it internally or externally. Maintaining boundaries with your family is likely one of the most challenging dynamics that you will have to come to terms with, because when it comes to family, there is a sense of unspoken entitlement, and this is especially true with a lot of Asian families, as they tend to associate entitlement with respect for the elderly, which however only seems to work one way. A lot of people tend to be accustomed to the idea there is a sense of grandiosity that the elders should be given respect and priority by default, regardless of their actions and how it impacts another person, which is what creates emotional trauma when an individual is suppressed, silenced, with their emotional needs and wants being dismissed or disregarded only to have things done their way. We have learned with the help of modern psychology that emotional blackmail is a form of emotional abuse. However, in many cultures, emotional blackmail has long existed and has been part of their conditioning, which has been passed on to our current generation. However, as we evolved, we stepped into the information age, which has provided us with access and the tools that is needed that no other generation before us had before, which gives us an opportunity to unlearn these patterns and make a conscious shift to our reality. And naturally, when we challenge the status quo, we will face a lot of resistance. When we speak of trauma, it is important to consider that our parents were conditioned by their parents where boundaries were almost non-existent back in the days, especially for women. When we look back at the society and its system and the social construct that probably dates back 50 years ago, women were oppressed. They were expected to put others first and never allowed to have an opinion. Emotional expression was never part of their conditioning. A woman's superpower lies in her ability to connect with her heart space, which is then delivered through emotional expression. However, when that natural ability is suppressed by the community around her, it creates a disconnect. When they have never learned boundaries, it is very hard or almost impossible to get accustomed to something that they are not familiar with. It is like expecting them to understand a language that they never heard or spoken before. Now, I personally experienced this with my mom as well when I try to exert boundaries with her where she feels rejected, or there's this sense of defensiveness that gets passed on as, oh, I am your mom, it shouldn't apply to me, it's not a big deal, or I'm not an outsider. But I know better that it doesn't work that way, and why it is important to have those boundaries in place. And it's especially important for adult children to set healthy boundaries with their parents if you want to take stock of your life and create your own reality beyond the social construct that was built for us. A lot of people will end up staying longer in toxic relationships or situationships because they are looking for the comforting lies rather than accepting the uncomfortable truth that is already present. It is easier for us to want the validation by accepting the comforting lies because it brings a sense of comfort to our own ego, which then denies accountability. So instead, we use these comforting lies to justify our choices and actions because it is so much easier to blame the other person instead of taking responsibilities for the choices and decisions that we make. Oftentimes, at the start of a romantic relationship, there are subtle signs and clues that is already present when they are not going all in, or maybe they are not showing up in the way you want, or they are not respecting your boundaries. But we try to find excuses in these comforting lies because hearing the truth can be really hard for a lot of us. However, we tend to gravitate towards crossing our own boundaries in the face of rejection because the ego finds it hard to accept not being chosen. When we don't honor our boundaries, our relationships will mirror that back to us. When we fail to honor ourselves and give so much stock to the other person, they will begin to reject us in the ways of dismissing our feelings, our emotional needs, which then leads to the ultimate rejection of not being chosen by them consciously. Being chosen is a conscious effort that requires two willing participants for it to work. So if a person sees your boundaries as a challenge, they are choosing not to participate and accept your individuality because that would require more effort on their part. However, if you do not uphold your own boundaries, they will continue to violate you only because you are choosing to allow that to happen to you. When you begin to assert boundaries, you are bound to face a lot of challenges as your boundaries gets called into question. And this is something a lot of individuals struggle with because it does lead to the inevitable rejection. Now, rejection can show up in various ways. It can be from a friend trying to convince you to go to a late night party that you probably don't feel comfortable, or maybe you have to say no because you have your personal reasons, and this can lead to them acting cold towards you or not including you in their future plans or acting indifferent towards you. Now, how many of you have experienced this? Because I have personally experienced this when, well, I was much younger. This can also happen in a family dynamic. For example, a parent that refuses to accept your choice for a partner because it doesn't seem to fit their requirements or their criteria for you, which is often a common occurrence in a lot of South Asian households where I come from, and it still does happen until now. It's prevalent, unfortunately, in our society, which then leads them to engage in protest behaviors by refusing to accept your choice that would lead to the ultimate disagreement and probably a potential fallout within the family members. And sometimes the adult children will have no choice but to walk away and honor their own needs, or it can go the other way when the child would have to give in to the parents' demands and let go of their partner, which then leads to the unfortunate abandonment and rejection of the partner. So what do these examples tell you? It is clear that the other person involved is not consciously choosing you by respecting your wants and needs. Instead, they choose to use protest behaviors by giving you the cold treatment or the silent treatment just so that they can have things done their way, which is not right. It is not healthy for any relationship because it would create a lot of resentment. There are many ways that people can show up being selfish to get things done their way. But if it means setting boundaries would cost you people around you, you are choosing yourself in the process. And there is no bigger act of self-love that you can offer for yourself. It is better to be alone and be a free man instead of being enslaved by another person's desire to have control over you. So choose wisely. Your boundaries are a display of the courage you have to ask someone to meet you in the way you respect yourself. When you assert boundaries, you make a way to explore the possibilities of that connection by allowing an honest conversation, which will reveal how someone perceives you. Someone that respects you will be drawn to your ability to have boundaries and have a strong self-concept, and this will only draw you closer. While someone feeling threatened would reveal their insecurities and their inability to meet you in the way that you need in order to build a successful connection. Now, on the flip side, just as you having boundaries could lead to others feeling rejected, you will very much experience rejection in your personal life as well, be it at work, at your community, with your friends, with your romantic prospects, and even your family members. Now, experiencing rejection can be harsh, and I will not dismiss the emotional pain that comes with not feeling chosen or accepted. However, we can reframe this. So speaking of experiencing rejection, have you been in a position where you were constantly applying for so many jobs and you were receiving multiple rejections to only finally land a job with a much better position, with a company that is more aligned with you, with a much better compensation package than you had initially wanted? That ex-partner that abandoned you or rejected you or denied your connection probably led you to a breakthrough, discover your passion, explore new interests and potential that you never knew you had. Oftentimes, the rejection that presents in our lives are meant to steer us away to a path that we would otherwise be too comfortable to explore. And in order for us to make that change in direction, our current reality needs to break down. And it often happens through a person, a situation, or circumstances, because we do not grow when we are in our comfort zone. Rejections are a necessary part of our evolution. And if you always allow someone to choose for you, you will never find contentment in all that you do. Yes, rejections can be painful. However, there is nothing more painful than rejecting your own needs and desires. No matter who you are, what your age, your marital status, it is never too late to make the changes that you need for yourself. If you are struggling to set boundaries around your family, your loved ones, you will first need to discover your own individuality, and that has its own process and a journey to be explored. Now, if you would like to understand how you can set boundaries and standards for yourself, please feel free to check out my video where I talk about standards and expectations, where I also talk about the 3 lines of priorities, which is health, your finances, and your relationships, and how you can develop your boundaries and priorities around these 3 main aspects. You can only be free to explore your individuality when you break free from the confinement of limitations that was placed on you. We are all born into this world with limitless possibilities and opportunities, and what would set us apart from the rest is our own ability to believe in our convictions and push through our own limitations. Now, your boundaries will enable you to establish your standards, and once you are able to define what works for you, the toughest part would be integrating this into your day-to-day life, which comes with its own challenges and resistance. However, you may also lose your loved ones along the way, but you will meet a more aligned version of yourself, and most importantly, the right people will enter your life.